All right, so what's today's project?
Well, today we're going to be repotting a pothos, as a matter of fact. But you made mention to it in the last video, so I think introductions are in store here, or due. This is our efficiency expert. Next to him is his brother Pook Dog, and of course you know Angie from last time.
Hey, Pook Dog.
And those are our real names too.
Yes, the efficiency expert and Pook Dog. Actually, you know what? You really ought to turn that thing around because everyone wants to see our cameraman Don.
Okay, let's roll outside.
Okay, we've got a pot-bound pothos, which of course up here in the north is strictly a house plant. We're going to take this poor thing because you can see the soil that it's in. If you can zoom up close here, it hasn't been repotted in a while. The soil has gotten very old and it needs to be freshened up. So we're going to put it in a slightly bigger pot. We're going to loosen its roots up, and basically we're going to give it some room to grow. Here, come on over here. It's one of these things. We never waste the old soil. We'll just use it as part of a mix later. But
just remind you, there isn't very much soil to that.
I mean, you can see the roots.
Now that's root bound, correct?
Yeah, it's really root bound, and the soil itself is not extremely nutritious. We're going to put it in a much better soil. We're going to make it happy, and then in a couple of weeks, actually, what we're going to do is we're actually going to start some cuttings off of this, because pothos is actually very easy to start cuttings off of. And if we can find one of the ends here, if you take a look underneath, you're actually going to see all these little nodules right here. These nodules, if they were to touch soil, they would actually start setting their own root by themselves. What we'll end up doing is we'll actually take like some cuttings off the end, use a little root tone, and we'll put them in some soil and they'll take right off.
Now root tone, that's a rooting hormone, correct?
Yeah, rooting hormone is available all throughout the country.
But necessarily you don't have to use root tone to get them to root.
No, sometimes, especially like if anyone has a spider plant, basically you just put a cutting of a spider plant into water and they'll grow. We're massaging the roots so this way they start to loosen up, and when we put them in the new soil, it'll be a lot easier and a lot faster for them to start running outward.
And I'm going to ask, this is not something that is anything other than an ornamental, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, there's nothing. Is there any herbal use for this?
No.
No.
It's not edible?
Nope. I mean, these down south, my parents have one up the side of their house down in Florida. They'll get leaves on them planted in the ground down there. They're in zone 10, planted in the ground. These things actually get leaves about 2 feet around. Up here you can see that's about the leaf size here. Down south though, they'll get extremely
in a warmer environment inside, they do get quite big. My sister has one and they're very big.
Yeah, she probably has a much, this is almost, keeping it in a hanging basket like that is almost like a bonsai. A bonsai tree, or bonsai bush, depending on how you want to call it, is really nothing more than a regular tree or shrub kept in a small pot, and by keeping the roots small, you actually keep the top small. And by only putting this in a 10-inch hanging basket, it limits where the roots can go.
There's one.
But I mean, as you can see...
This is what you would want to do before you split them, so you know which ones you're splitting.
Now, just
what are you doing there? You're untangling all the vines?
Yes. Because then you can actually...
Now, this plant, in all honesty, looks like it had been neglected for quite some time. Wouldn't you untangle the vines on a regular basis?
Well, actually,
if this was something that you were trying to propagate?
You would vine them.
Yeah, if you were trying to propagate it. I mean, literally, this has just been hanging in the office window for years, and it's just to the point that as it grew, we just kept looping it around itself and looping it around and looping it around. That's why you look at like the tops of the strands, there's no leaves on this part here. All the leaves are down on the lower section, because this part here has literally just been looped around and looped around and looped around.
But if you let it go, the leaves will sprout out.
I mean, here's a little piece that obviously was touching the soil in the pot, it broke off from the main plant, it's got its own little roots. That's an entire separate little plant. He can be repotted up. We'll probably put him in the old pot again. So, we're all untangled?
All untangled.
Okay. So, put some soil in our pot.
Okay, so what are we using here again? This looks like that same Miracle Grow potting mix that we used in our window box.
Yeah, it's available everywhere.
Now, if someone did not have access to a retail store that sold this for some reason, what would we mix together to create a general purpose potting mix?
Okay, basically what they've got in here, if you take a look, if you get in close, you'll notice, you know, some different colorations and stuff. These are actually just little fertilizer pellets, just a little bit of fertilizer that they add in, not a lot. You've got things, the white in there that you see is actually perlite. Perlite's an additive. It actually helps to aerate the soil and improve the drainage. A lot of the medium base is peat moss, and they also have, there's composted bark and things in there. I mean, these are actually all
so it's just it's a basic humus mix, really.
Yeah. They do put a little bit of lime in there to counteract the acidity of peat moss. Peat moss is very acidic. Angie's got the pot ready.
Okay, let's check the pot out. There we go. Pot's all set.
Okay, you got to back up.
That looks like it's about half full or so.
Yep, because we've got the root ball that's going to fill it up.
Okay, so what you wind up after you got rid of all the old soil off that root-bound plant is a root ball.
For the most part, yeah. We're not going to shake all the soil off of it, but basically we loosened up all of the ends, all of the feeder roots, basically. So they will be able to spread quickly and easily through the new soil mix.
Now, when you talk about compost, how old does compost have to be before it's ready to be used to pot plants?
Really depends on what's in the mix. You know, depending on, there's certain things that take longer to break down, like a lot of manures, a lot of your fresh cow manure and stuff like that. Generally, you like it to be composted for a couple of years because fresh manure is actually very high in nitrogen. Nitrogen can burn. Compost, there isn't a fixed formula. A lot of it is trial and error, rule of thumb. Different people will use different things.
So if someone has access to fresh manure, you don't want to use it unless it's at least 2 to 3 years old.
Yeah.
It's usually best if it's older. But I mean, you can use fresh manure, say like just kind of like side dressing in the garden, but you wouldn't want to plant.
Well, that's essentially a root developer, correct?
Actually, the manure for the most part is going to work as a basically upper plant and leaf development because the manure is actually fresh manure. You know, the fresher it is, the hotter it is. A lot of nitrogen. It's going to give you a lot of leaf development. As it gets older and compost down, then it gets a little bit more balanced to the point where, you know, the nitrogen levels in it basically diminish as it ages, and then you can use it as a regular, you know, soil additive. This is the little tendril that was already potted up. He was already growing in the old pot, and we figured, well, we're just going to give him a little bit of room, let him grow in his own pot. Our plant is done. He's actually quite long. In fact, here, I'll hold the pot.
Well, we have to zoom out for that.
Yeah, right, you can zoom out. I mean, the tendrils basically are probably about 7 to 8 feet long. And after the roots have a chance to get adjusted to the new soil, in a couple of weeks, what we'll actually start doing is we're going to cut those long tendrils back so that our plant itself is basically going to be just what's around the pot here. A lot of this other stuff we're going to cut back, and we will actually start it in separate little pots, probably 4-inch pots, maybe some of these 6-inch pots. So this way they can actually grow out, and we'll actually sell them this spring in the garden center.
Outstanding.